Oh, and Bob, I work with the boys at Liberator here in Atlanta, who was your distributor back in the day.
Oh, no way. I love Jason.
With Jason, yep.
Yeah.
I'm sitting with him tomorrow, so.
Awesome.
All right, we are live. And so folks are just catching up a little bit in the background. But my name is William Teasley. I am one of the co-founders of Khonso Brewing, a brewery startup in planning, whatever the terms that we use today to sort of define those businesses in that process. And there was a discussion around inviting people to participate in a discussion in a panel that have had to make probably one of the hardest decisions people in this business want to make, which is deciding that the tank is empty and we can't really go much further than where we are, and closing their brewery or beer related business, and then moving to whatever that second life is after being a part of this game. A lot of the lessons that some of our panelists have shared has been incorporated in what we do, and we want to create this opportunity sort of to learn from their bumps and bruises, trials and tribulations, in order to help everyone in this business be better and move forward. So I'm going to pass it off now to the panel. And we'll start with Kelly. Just introduce yourself and a little background and what got you started in beer.
All right. So my name's Kelly Meyer. I got started in beer simply from unfortunately, the story I hear many times. I had a successful first career and a couple of dollars in the bank, and was like, it'd be really fun. Let me open a brewery. And unfortunately, I used about that same level of business acumen when writing the business plan, but had a blast. I served a 10-year sentence as a brewery owner, and now with podcasts, wrote a book about it. Still love beer, but glad to be here today.
Where are you located?
Texas, between San Antonio and Austin.
Got it. And what was your brewery's name?
New Braunfels Brewing Company.
Got it. Excellent. So, Bob?
Bob Sylvester from the former St. Summer Brewing Company. Similar to Kelly, I hit a point in my life where I thought it'd be cool to open a brewery in 2006, and plugged along pretty well for 10 years as strictly a production brewery, no tasting room, just everything into distribution, and things are going well, and got a wild idea that maybe it's time to open a tasting room and take out a giant loan. So we built a new brewery, built a separate new tasting room, and things went downhill from there after a couple of years, and closed the tasting room actually yesterday. It was the 4th anniversary of our shutting down the tasting room. Decided to keep the brewery open because the tasting room was the big drain, and kind of the world around us started falling apart. Wasn't necessarily lack of business or lack of demand. It was everything else. Our distribution network crumbled. We'll get into all the other fun stuff later. But anyway, survived, retired, moved to North Carolina. The brewery was in Tarpon Springs, Florida. And now I've kind of morphed into Somewhere Else Brewing, which is not really a brewing company, but it allows me to do some collabs and work with other breweries, things like that, and still have fun in the industry.
Awesome. All right, Dean?
Dean Brundage, formerly of New Republic Brewing out in College Station, Texas. Similar to Kelly, I was kind of the dumb home brewer who thought, hey, there's that voice in the back of my head. Let's listen to it. And so I opened up a little 1-barrel brew house doing maybe 100 barrels a year, and then upgraded that to a 20-barrel brew house doing about 600 to 800 barrels a year, when my partner and I had some differences of opinions and parted ways. recognized that I needed to get into one of the things that we were lacking at the brewery was food. So I got into the restaurant industry, and I've been doing that for about 5 years now, almost. Yikes.
Got it. Real quick, and just sound off, what was your first craft beer?
Pete's Wicked Ale.
All right.
I'm old, so it was Bass Ale.
Oh, okay. Dean?
I don't remember the first craft beer I had, but I do remember the first craft beer I hated, and that was Arrogant Bastard. Man, that was garbage when I first tried it.
That's a rough beer.
It was, and it was early on in my craft beer journey.
As they would say, I guess you weren't worthy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and real quick, I was just in Boston and went to college there. I had one of the first Sam Adams dark ales, and I accidentally bought a keg of it for a keg party in college, and people hated me for it, and now it's a thing.
Yeah.
It was ahead of my time. So with
You were the
that,
one.
yeah. But bit by the bug. And people can jump in this as we move forward. We're going to talk about starting up and opening, and with how important was having a business plan to your startup operations, if you had one. If you developed,
At the beginning, we had absolutely no idea what to do, because in those days there weren't a lot of breweries around, and most of the ones that were around were brew pubs. They were restaurants first that also happened to make beer. And I wanted to be a production brewery, didn't want to deal with restaurant end or any of that. So I really had very few people to fall back on, and just kind of thought, hey, let's open a brewery. We'll do this and this and this, and it'll be great. And it was for a while. And then, things normalized. Other breweries opened.
I mean, the business plan would have been valuable if it was probably properly constructed on our part and had some actual numbers in it and stuff. Or realistic numbers anyway. We knew sort of like, because the TABC publishes consumption data, we sort of knew if we could take like maybe 1% or 0.5% of the craft beer consumed in this county, then we might be okay. But that was kind of the extent of our financial modeling.
Yeah, I had to do an extensive business plan when we expanded, because SBA requires a business plan. So I had no want to do that myself. I hired somebody that does this professionally, and they did a tremendous job. With my input, they got numbers from Brewers Association. They did a very deep dive and did a tremendous job. But the weak point was it all hinged around tasting room volume. Tasting room volume was going to basically cover everything. And then the production side of the brewery, which we were still going to do, was going to be gravy. And, that would allow us to expand, to screw around, maybe add a restaurant, things like that. That was the first thing that just collapsed, was the volume was about 15% of what was anticipated. And I was a little shocked. I didn't think the number was really high, especially compared to, breweries that had been open within, 25-mile radius. And that was ultimately what did us in, was the really, I guess, overvaluing foot traffic into the tasting room.
Yeah. Kelly?
Well, I would answer that two different ways. One, I'll answer what I did or didn't do, and then I'll kind of say like what I've heard from everybody else as I've interviewed. But in my specific situation, I had enough of a handle on it. But think back to 2011 in Texas, and Dean can back me up on this.
Mm-hmm.
A big tenet of my business model was I'm going to move into this building. It's going to be $2,500 a month, and I'm going to be the only brewery in town. That in itself was kind of the fundamental tenet of it. And within 12 months, that completely turned on its head. There were other breweries that had opened up, and one that beat us. There was another one in planning. And when you just took the numbers, everything that I had decided to do was completely irrelevant at that point. And so I had a plan, but I wasn't nimble enough to change it and or smart enough to realize that when the fundamental tenets of it were gone, probably should have walked away at that time. I also started with a 1-barrel system, or 2-barrel system. That was part of my plan. Quickly learned that I needed to upgrade to 15 barrels. That wasn't in the plan. Those prices weren't in the plan. The distribution needed for that wasn't in the plan. And again, we kind of got into it, and it was this, I want this brewery. I'm so passionate about doing it. I'm excited about it. And it's fucking cool to make beer. But I forgot to also accept that maybe I shouldn't have upgraded that system and or should have done a 4-barrel 7-barrel system or something else. And the other piece of that I would say is that more people I've interviewed and I've done, some light consulting work. The business plan is important. I think you have to have one. And the reason that you have to have one is that you have to have thought of all the angles. If you're a home brewer that won an award, you don't know anything about marketing. At the end of the day, even the little bit you have to research to write that plan is an imperative thought exercise that you now know. But someone had told me like the business plan is super important until the second that it's not, and then you need to throw it the hell away and move on. And I couldn't agree more. Like you have to also in this industry be nimble as hell with the tight margins to be able to say, okay, that's got to stop. We have to go completely this way and pivot on a dime, and have the money to do it, unfortunately. So.
Got it. So, Kelly, since you were in there, how were things going? After you opened, how were things going?
In the beginning, so like the first year was terrible. We're just gonna take that little chunk out and get rid of it. But I'm gonna give you a quick story. We opened in January. By August, I wrote a letter and sent it to all of our fans, letting them know that we had closed the brewery, hired a consultant, and we're rebuilding at a larger scale, which anyone's ever ordered equipment in Brewery America knows that it didn't come in a month. And so it took until May of the following year to get reopened with a bigger system. But after that, it kind of ran at a good clip. Back then in Texas, you were either a brew pub or a production brewery, and we were a production brewery. So, not a lot of on-site consumption. When we did, it was a tour. So you could bank on, hundreds of dollars in a day and then merch sales. And it was compartmentalized into a, 3-hour afternoon that my wife and I could do and then go on a date afterwards. And then that changed when the model changed in about 2 years after we opened. And then everybody had to have a tasting room because if you weren't serving flights, your competitor was, and that's what people wanted. And then the timing changed. So even then, though, the revenue was still there. The growth was there. We expanded distribution, fairly quickly from our local market to Austin and then to San Antonio and then to Houston in the course of, 3 to 4 years, maybe. And I mean, for the most part, it was working. But the biggest thing for us, and we're foreshadowing, but was really probably the competition in Texas was the biggest, or all over the country, but predominantly in Texas was the issue.
Got it. And we'll get back to that.
Yeah.
Probably my biggest misstep was we were in Tarpon Springs, which is on the west coast of Florida, kind of north, slightly west of Tampa, but not a lot. It's it's half an hour drive at most, half an hour from like Clearwater, St. Pete, maybe a little farther to St. Pete. So St. Somewhere was kind of identified with Tarpon Springs. I mean, we were, we'd been there 10 plus years, 12 years. So I thought, well, if we're going to open a tasting room, it's got to be in Tarpon Springs because that's where we're known, not just locally, but other people know to come to Tarpon Springs. And that was a horrible mistake. Tarpon is just about 100% tourist driven area, but it's only tourist driven certain times of the year, like January through March, baseball season, spring training, and then that's it. Then summer, they just, roll up the sidewalks and put bags over the street lights, and that's it. And, I arrogantly thought, well, we're St. Somewhere, damn it. Well, people are going to drive just to come here. And people that came from out of town, out of state, out of the country did. But whatever we did, we could not get local traffic. Local meaning Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater, all the people around us. We not to sound arrogant, but I had connections in the industry, and we would have Cantillon on. I'd get crazy draft that no one in the country had, and it still was not enough. We'd have a 20-liter keg of Cantillon for 2-3 weeks, which is insane. Most breweries will put it on, advertise it, and it's gone that afternoon. We just really could not get people to come to Tarpon Springs.
Yeah, but as William's question, though, because you're a good example, I've heard the story a lot. It took you years to be able to finally supply the market with what they were asking for, right? So, I mean, in the beginning, you were making, you're selling everything you could make, and you couldn't make enough, right?
Yeah, and that was, up until the end. Again, the business plan called for the tasting room to cover our nut, and it didn't. So it was, instead of feeding, it was sucking money out.
I think that's one of the tasting room is one of the only things that saved us for so long. I mean, we were about a 10-minute drive outside of town, in a town where everything is 15 minutes away from everything else. So it took people a while to find us. But once the grad students latched on, and they started coming out to the tasting room, and that sustained us for a couple of years for sure.
Yeah,
because we were the only brewery in town at the time.
Yeah, but the lack of traffic in the tasting room took money out of the production side, so it got to the point where couldn't afford to buy raw ingredients, couldn't afford to buy bottles, and it
what was it about the tasting room that was drawing so much money?
Well, we bought 2 buildings. So we bought the brewery and we bought the building for the tasting room, and renovated both of them to the nth degree. I mean, they're tasting room to this day is just absolutely amazing. Somebody else is in there now, and it was like nothing else, frankly, in the country, except maybe Forest, Maine, and outside of Philadelphia.
I forget that some places don't just throw some picnic tables in a field and under a warehouse and call it good.
Yeah. No, this was it was an old house built 1912. Pretty big house, and I wanted it to be a old school Belgian beer bar, and that's what we built. And then the second floor was a couple of guest rooms that we were ultimately going to rent out. Just as a cool factor and generate a little bit of more income, but none of that came to fruition. We would have Wednesdays in particular were slow. I mean, we would have 0 Wednesdays where not a single person came in from noon to 10 o'clock. It's just gut wrenching.
Yeah,
to sit there.
I had days at the restaurant like that too. Yeah, they're heartbreaking.
And at the same time, St. Somewhere was a pretty well-known entity. I mean, we had beer all over the world, and in really great locations, great restaurants, every great beer bar across the country and the world, really. But couldn't get anybody in the tasting room. It's amazing.
Well, that kind of. Oh, Dean, you're about to.
I was just gonna try to segue into the next question for you.
Oh, so that first clue?
Yeah, the first clue, exactly.
Well,
I mean, so we, I don't know, when we were really starting to feel the pain for me, I started my business partner was the financial guy, the CFO. So I took it upon myself when we were really starting to argue and try to figure out. I started looking at the books, and we're just looking at our production versus our sales and stuff, and we could start to see sort of a leveling off of our sales, maybe around 14, 15, right around there, 2014, 2015. And we, I'll go into more detail about the mistake that we made, but we did not concentrate on our home market. So it being the only brewery in town, we had it locked up. So we decided to go down to Houston, and looking at it, I could see that one of our routes, the Katy route, which some people might call a suburb of Houston and piss off the people who live there. But our Katy route, we were losing money on it. And so I suggested we cut it off. But that would have dropped our revenue, our cash flow. So it's hard to tell what to do in that kind of situation.
got it.
A lot to think about there.
Yeah, there is. So to that decision of where you're making money, but even if you're not making a lot of money, making that, it's like, well, we're not making that much there. Do we cut it off?
Right.
Sort of focus, I guess.
But it was also like a $2,000 a month or a $2,000 a week income stream. So like, how do you cut that off?
Got it.
Well, depending where it is in your business plan,
True.
Maybe that's driving traffic to College Station on the weekends, or Katy loses money, but those people drive into the city and they have your beer downtown. Who knows, right? That you can make the argument that it's brand building, and many big brewing companies do, where they're setting money on fire in one situation to ignite the bonfire somewhere else. I don't know, but I always err back on, if it doesn't make you money, don't do it. But that's an unpopular opinion in craft beer. So.
I think that's a simple thing. It's a simple maxim to understand, right? If it doesn't make you money, don't do it.
Yeah.
Got it. Kelly, your first clue.
Well, like I alluded to earlier, I would say that I, looking back, ignored most of them. But I would say for sure, one of the first clues when I had distribution was a big piece of our puzzle. And so I had a distributor that we had hooked up with fairly early on in Austin. They were the Miller distributor. They've now been bought and sold, but at the time they were wanting to get into craft beer. And so the idea was like, we would be their craft brand. We would drive that channel of their business. And while that could have happened, it would have taken investment in both education of their staff and team, buy-in top to bottom, particularly on the delivery driver side. And when I would go do these ride-alongs, I'd meet with the guys at the top. We weren't getting anywhere. And, I kind of thought naively, and some of that may have been true, that just the market wasn't ready. We were building from the ground floor. But what I, in hindsight, realized is that distributor was never going to be a player in the craft beer space, that they were only going to they were the lowest common denominator distributor. And so that was a concern. I should have revamped many things. And so we can get into that if you want, but that was definitely one. One of the other ones was on the opposite side of having let's do a small, nimble, regional, like specialty esoteric distributor. And then those guys didn't have the bandwidth. So we'd have these meetings in December and be like, okay, here's our plan for the year. And within the second pickup, the plan was already crap. I didn't get the export that we needed. And my wife and I were like, well, we needed, $17,900 to break even this month. And these guys didn't pick up to it. So that was another red flag. That I think the distribution piece, I either needed to somehow fundamentally change, which, going back, there are some things I would do differently, and or rely upon it less, which I think is the message that most people in craft beer are sort of saying now, like, own your over-the-counter business and only have distribution if you have to. That was a piece. And then, like I said, there's three other catastrophic moments I could mention, but I think those are two big sort of caution points in the beginning. And then when we knew it was time was just when we couldn't get no matter what we did, it wasn't moving the needle. Kind of like Dean has said, that you hit and I think a lot of breweries do that. And maybe Bob, you kind of did too. Like you just go to run up, and then you can't get above it and you can't get more. And what you find is your expenses creep up and different things happen. And that's what happened to us, that we had to hire a guy. We didn't have the money to pay the guy. The production came down 10%, and now we're not profitable. And that was sort of the red flags in the end. So
Good money chasing after bad.
Consistently. Yeah.
That's the song we sing.
Yeah. And there's always that hope. Well, something's going to change next week. If we can just get past this hurdle, we'll be fine. And then you don't get past that hurdle, and you're like, well, if only this will happen, let's work on that. And, you see it all the time. Shelton Brothers, who was my main distributor.
God rest their soul.
Yeah. When they shut down, everybody was pissed. How can they do that? They sold tickets to the festival, and now they're not going to refund. And, they didn't plan on closing. They wanted to stay open, and they thought, let's just do this. That'll give us an edge. And, I did that myself. We'll change this little thing and that'll do it. And it doesn't. Well, okay, let's do it this way. And, nobody looks to close. It looks at you. It's not your goal. It's not what you go for. It just happens. And you give up eventually because you have to. And that's it. Also want to touch on, Kelly's discussion on distributors. To people coming into the industry, don't fear your distributor. Also, don't go in with the idea that, okay, I signed the contract, I'm theirs for life, they can do whatever. I went through, in a period of 15 years, probably 20, 25 distributors. You can definitely break the contracts. You can meet with them, say, you're just not holding up your end of the bargain. Neither one of us are making any money. Let's divorce, and they'll do it. I mean, it's not etched in stone as the industry seems to make it out to be. Just want to throw that in there.
That's heartening.
And I can personally attest, when we started, we had a distributor, and we ended up with an amicable separation for the same reasons. Was we weren't really helping each other make money.
Yeah, and that happens all the time.
Yeah. And we also got caught because we were we still do contract brewing, but as COVID hit, we were on premise only, and that just literally shut us down. So that's when we regrouped and took out another, built another business plan, and sort of have been more observant of what's happening in the market. And I want to get you guys' opinions from where you started to where it is. What have been some of the major shifts or changes that you guys have seen just in beer production market, et cetera, over the years?
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but IPAs are kind of a thing.
Well, what is an IPA?
Right.
Oh, and don't forget, Dean likes milkshake IPA, so don't look on that.
Dirty little secret.
I mean, as far as my business and Kelly's too, we were kind of at the cutting edge. Everybody wanted wild beer and mixed fermentation and 750s and Brett, and then all of a sudden, that disappeared.
Orange juice. All they wanted was orange juice after that, and dessert.
Orange juice and Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Well, I would even speak a little bit to the business side, that especially in Texas is one example, but like in Texas, when we opened in 2011, Like I said, you had to choose either brew pub or brewery. And so that whole warehouse, afterthought, kind of the tasting room in the front was the norm. Like everybody kind of did that, except to their credit, maybe presciently, Jester King, they did create sort of that destination brewery early on. But pretty much everybody else was just a crappy little, taps through the wall into the walk-in that you're using for kegs. And then the law changed in 13 for the better. I'm not arguing that at all. But fundamentally, the entire shift changed where now you should have a badass tasting room, this cool environment and an architectural space, like something like Bob did. But like Bob would attest to, that takes a lot more money than taps through the walls into the cooler that you're putting kegs in. And so, and location, right? So now, like Dean said, I'm outside the city. I got this really cool spot, but there's this brew pub right across from campus just slinging beers. And that's where the competition and that's where the people are going, my competitor. So I think there was this fundamental shift in how business got done in craft beer. And then obviously COVID changed it again. And I obviously go into more detail on that, but I think it evolves every 3 to 5 years, or has been. And, you guess what's next. I don't know, but that's somebody's job. So.
Yeah, I think once we crested probably 5,500 or 6,000 breweries, it was no longer about beer, the draw into a tasting room. You could make the best beer in the world, highest rated, but the guy down the street is having, weekly outdoor concerts and cornhole and all that, and you're serving great beer. Which one's going to win? It's the guy down the street.
Right. Yeah. You're competing now for like as a restaurant would for all those people. And if you don't create your own kind of unique or interesting space, people are not going to go there. Like, picnic tables in a warehouse.
The entertainment side has just eclipsed the beer side. Yeah. Or they're no longer pubs. They're, entertainment centers.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd saw too is that I talked to somebody recently about one difference is that, like, for us, we were in downtown New Braunfels, a little historic German town. People like to walk around with beer and shop for antiques and go see the concert at the Phoenix Saloon on the corner. So the rent there was commensurate with what those businesses can support. And when you have spirits, you've got a 10 to 12x markup. We can't compete with that with beer as far as the volume versus profit. And so it does struggle a little bit in the tasting room to be able to pay those rents, be in that area, but not have the same access to the kind of profitability that those businesses do. And it can be done, but I think you really have to think about that before you go in. If I'm going to pay this rent, what games am I going to play to get there? Because just slinging beer over the counter is not going to be good enough.
Right. And that's where I had an advantage. My rent was dirt cheap, and I had a big backyard, and we put up a stage, and I basically did what I wanted to do every night, is listen to music and drink beer and hang out with friends.
What you're going to do anyways. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's what we did for 10 years at our first location, which was just a really little industrial park, had probably, 30 units in it. And we were, 1,200 square foot unit. And the laws, actually the law didn't change, just the people figured out, there's a loophole in the law to where you could serve on premises. I couldn't get a license, but we were allowed to, sell a glass or charge for a tour and then, give away free beer. So I, put up a pop-up outside and charge $10 for a glass. And when you buy the glass, you got 3 free pours. And I think we actually had more volume then than we did in the tasting room, which is amazing because people like that. It's like coming to a speakeasy. You're driving down this desolate road, and then there's this industrial park that's closed at this point because these are all carpenters, mechanics, things like that. 5 o'clock, they're out the door. I put the pop-up up at 6, and it's like a little street party.
Yeah, now that I think people aren't going to be impressed by that anymore, right? And that's sort of one of the things that has changed over the years is that now consumers expect like you have like a frisbee golf course or something like that, or mini golf, or whatever on-site video games. It's like that's one of the things that has changed from the like whatever third wave 2010 opening like we did to 2016 2017, right when things started to crunch.
Also, I think there's something that wasn't there in the earlier days, which was families.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's been something. I was recently in Boston, or outside of Boston, at this. It was rainy and cold with sleet, and I walk into this brewery, and there are kids running around everywhere, fairly well behaved,
Yeah.
but strollers, and it's just like, good gosh, they were probably it felt like there were just as many kids there as there were adults drinking. So has that been something? I mean, that's been something I've just begun to observe more and more and more, which is a young couple, one or two kids meeting another young couple with it, and having an environment that's workable with that. The old industrial model is kind of doesn't, because sound would go crazy off the walls.
And that might have actually like originated from the breweries that just had a field where you could just let your kids go in a field, probably fenced in, and you just sit there at the picnic table and watch them run around. As long as they were sort of behaved, nobody cared. You were out in the country, or you were in some industrial park. And then it migrated to like actual pubs, which I'm all for that culture. Pub culture is great.
Yeah, and that's an important piece of just getting more people to the brewery. I know so there's a couple in town that owns a brewery, Anna and Keith, who I love to death. And their policy is you can have kids there, but they have to be well behaved. And unfortunately, that's vague. And so they do, when they post something on Facebook, there'll be 250 comments for and against. Like, people just go nuts about this rule because it's not a rule. And I get it. I have a 17 and an 18-year-old. And when they were young, I can't tell you how many wineries and breweries they visited back when I was, thinking about opening a brewery. And we did it all the time. And it was, like Dean said, I guess maybe we went to places at that point that were less pub oriented and more field oriented, but it wasn't a big deal. My kids were fairly well behaved, but at the same time, somebody who doesn't have kids that's there to enjoy a quiet afternoon wouldn't have enjoyed the experience. I'm sure that my kids annoyed somebody. So, yeah.
Well, my kids are 22 and 19, and my son both of them know their way around a brewery. So they followed me up to brew houses and things like that. But it's been, I don't know, maybe post COVID now everyone's just dying to get out and reconnect. But it's just, I'm like, wow, there just seem to be a lot more kids in breweries, and the tap room helps. The tap room environment helps.
Yeah. I don't live too far from Sierra Nevada here in Mills River. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't live close enough where I can just, go and have a beer. It's about 40 minutes away. But of course, anybody that comes to town, that's the first place they want to go. So I was meeting someone there at 11:30 on a Sunday morning. So it opens at 11:30. So I get there, like 11:20, and there are probably 45, 50, I don't want to say people, humans waiting outside the door.
Little bitty humans.
Yeah. 2/3 were little kids and their parents. And I'm waiting with them, and they're looking at me by myself like I'm, some kind of perv looking to. And I felt uncomfortable. I'm like, what the hell? I'm at a brewery. Why should I feel uncomfortable at this point? And then the doors open, and all hell broke loose, and they all ran in, went crazy. But yeah, it was it wasn't scary, but it was kind of shocking seeing that atmosphere with that volume of people. I mean, I was literally the only one that was by myself without kids. It was crazy. It was a weird experience.
In all fairness, Bob, I've never actually drank with you, but I have this vision in my head that when you have a few, that you run around with your shoes off, pooping your diaper.
Well, this is true.
All right. So why don't each of you guys share what you would tell others that are like me, getting, starting a brewery, and also what you would tell someone that's been in the business a while and might not see, is doing that. Hey, another week, another month. Hey, we made payroll that month. Oh, let's get one more. So what would you tell these guys, both starting and operating now, that could shed some light on some of the things they're doing?
Again, hindsight is 2020. I would highly recommend, someone's going to open a brewery, be your own landlord, own the building, do whatever you can to own the building you're in, or own the section of the building you're in. That is, that's your ace in the hole if things go south. And that was the one thing we did. We bought the 2 buildings. When everything crumbled, we had enough equity, and since we renovated the buildings, the value went up considerably from when we bought them. And, I'm able to retire and live rather than, at 62, having to go out and, work in a brewery. But yeah, if you go the SBA route, the SBA will loan, I think, at least 20, maybe even 25 years on a package that contains real estate, where if it's not real estate, I think they're limited to 10 or 15 years. You're going to be paying rent anyway. Your rent is going to be more than what your mortgage is going to be. Just buy the property. Do what you can to buy the property you're in.
If I bought my building, it would have been worth 3 times what I paid for it when I closed. So.
Yeah, that's my one biggest suggestion, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I don't have the definitive answer of everything I would say, because that's part of the goal of the podcast. That at 100 episodes, I plan to kind of extrapolate everything out into maybe the top 10. But overall, I would say that Bob's sentiment has been echoed in almost everyone I've spoken to. So the rent is one of those pieces that you're never going to have a hold on. And I think a lot of people getting into renting a building for the first time in their career just can't get their head around why it would go up every year, no matter what, or worst case, every 5 years at renewal. And it's one of those things that in your business plan, you kind of think, hey, well, revenue is going to go up. Margins typically don't. Profitability doesn't. It kind of stays consistent, no big jumps. And all that rent does is just chop away at it. And base rent's a piece of it, but I have seen CAM charges come back where, the annual reconciliation, you owe $15,000 in the next 30 days. Otherwise you're evicted. And just stuff like that it's hard to get a handle on. So I would absolutely echo Bob's sentiment that I would even go so far as to say, if you can't buy, don't open. Then you don't have the capital to do it. And your business model isn't going to support long-term sustainability.
Certainly in this market.
Yeah. And then, also just, again, like I said before, having a plan, but having contingencies in the plans. So many times I've read business plans with people who think, I had one, this dude he's a home brewer. He was going to open, and his first month he was going to do $40,000 in the tasting room. And by the 4th month, he's going to do $90,000 in the tasting room, an hour and a half outside of Houston, middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
It wasn't going to happen, but have a plan, but have contingencies, because when stuff goes south, you got to get that back up if your expenses are commensurate with that level, sales level. And I think most people just don't. Once they've got a plan, they stick to it, and they think when it's not working that it will work later, including us for the most part. We pivoted, but I don't think aggressively enough,
Yeah.
And then one of the most important things I would say for people that are opening now or open now, already open, be very, very wary of expansion. Our industry got super excited about expansion for so long because it was that so-and-so's blowing up. They're killing it. They got to expand. And the reality is that rarely now there's not enough demand in the marketplace to backfill that new expense, in my opinion, in most cases, overwhelmingly in most cases.
Yeah. And even the big guys, Constellation Brands, AB InBev, Diageo with Guinness shutting down.
Yeah.
There's a huge contraction going on right now. And, you have to go into it with your eyes open and realize that if you're opening a brewery, the beer is it's a very small part of what that business is. I've been into more breweries than I'd like to remember that the beer was just god awful. I mean, really flawed, not just like, oh, this isn't, to style. I mean, infected and bad. And the place was packed. And then 2 days later, I'll go into a place that has some of the most fantastic beer I've ever had in my life, and the place is empty. So it's no longer about the beer. Beer is not the draw.
I think
it's the hamburger in Applebee's.
But I think you can't make bad beer. Like, I don't know about that. As somebody who is actively thinking about starting up a brewery, let me give myself let me give all y'all out there a little bit of advice. I don't know. The thing about this is now you're going to have to differentiate your business. And that's always the case, but really you want to, I don't know, have a vision or a mission statement, have a 5-year plan, look at your expenses, really call all of your potential suppliers and get some actual hard costs to be able to plug into your financial model. And look at your taproom revenue and say, hey, yeah, 80% margin. Heck yeah, let's go. And then look at your distribution margin and go, oh, 5% margin. Ew. And then plug all that into a spreadsheet. And then the question that I'm really asking myself now is, and like, what experience do you want to create? Like, do you want to have a vintage diner or, a cyberpunk cafe or whatever? And the question I'm really asking myself is, can I get that same experience for cheaper by just remodeling my garage?
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Get a lot more satisfaction.
Right. I don't know. But is it really worth all of that hard work and pain and suffering and dealing with OSHA and stuff like that? But to ask yourself, do some hard soul searching. And also, I can echo Bob, buy the building. My restaurant, we bought the building. It's great. Our rent's not going to change for a very long time. And then to echo Kelly's statement, think really hard about your growth. And if I could recommend a book, which I read last year, that really impacted me, it's called Small Giants by Bo Burlingham. It's just about 15, 20 case studies of businesses that could have expanded wildly and chose to remain small, and how they, what their unique customer offering is. And it starts Anchor Steam's one of them, which was great. I could relate to that. There's a deli in New York, also kind of sort of what I'm doing. But then there's a records company, and just other weird businesses, Cliff Bar. So go check it out. And maybe don't expand. Maybe just keep your profitability where it is.
Yeah. We'll also be wary of the production levels too. I think a lot of guys are getting lost in that 300 to 700 barrel range, which is just a dump. You can make money smaller scale, and you can make money larger scale, but it's what 75% of the breweries in the Brewers Association make less than 1,000 barrels a year. It's an ugly place to fight it out, without that kind of revenue. So, really pay attention to where your revenue targets are going to be and how to get there. So.
Yeah. It's about the money.
That was one I didn't think of. was rev targets. What was your happiest either moment or day being a brewery owner?
Basically every day there was live music, and I was there with the friends.
This is the coolest thing ever. And then later we know it was like, what the fuck did I get into? Oh, sorry. What the heck did I get into?
Yeah, I think we all got into it for the fun for the most part, and very few of us are probably going to say it was a distributor meeting that was the best memory. But for me, it was we had maybe 3 years after re-expanding and reopening, I decided to try my hand at an Oktoberfest, and we're a city with two rivers. People come tube all the time. I called it Oktoberfest. It was Vienna heavy, where it had that kind of really deep biscuity character. I loved the beer, and we did a Oktoberfest celebration, and it was just, I mean, outside of the fact that I got drunk, nothing went wrong. It was just a fun day. Everybody came out, and it was beautiful weather for Texas. I mean, and that was one of those things that, with everything else I did, and I made beer that was definitely, in my opinion, better than that. It was exciting to distribute to 6 states and go meet my distributor in Portland, but it was just that event on site, hanging out with friends, drinking a beer I was proud of. That was the most fun memory for me.
Yeah, mine would have to be. I did, I've done a number of collaborations, but did one with probably my greatest heroes all together at the Old Saint somewhere. The year that the Shelton Brothers Fest was in St. Pete, I did a collaboration with Yvonne from De La Seine, Daniel from Thierry, Pierre Alex from Blaugy, and he wasn't involved, but my ultimate hero, Ron from Jolly Pumpkin, was always also there to heckle and just have fun. And we had such a great time doing the beer. I remember, we all were feeling a little tipsy, and towards the end, anybody that knows Yvonne from De La Seine, he's a huge hophead. So we're, thinking about, we didn't even have a recipe. We're just like, let's brew some beer. Here's what I have. And they're like, okay, we'll figure it out. So at the end, Yvonne goes, let's see your hops. And I had, I had probably 6 half-empty open bags of whatever they were, Sprischerspalt, EKG, it's a few other noble hops, whole cone. And he's like, throw them all in. And, I'm about 6 beers in. I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's do it. And we did. And the beer turned out great. The only problem was I could never, ever replicate that because I had no idea what was in there. Yeah. But the beer turned out fantastic. All the guys had a fantastic time. And after that, we've all become, great friends and keep in touch. Just did another collab, kind of a group collab in Belgium this past summer at De La Seine, and it was just as fun. It was kind of the same thing. His brewery is a lot bigger and automated, and he's got a huge staff, and they did all the work, and he just plied us with beer the whole time until it was okay. We got to do the first hop edition. We'd all run over there and throw it in, then go back to drinking. But yeah, that was probably the highlight of my entire career.
Yeah, it was all those days where, for me, early brew day, hard brew day, and then excited about a band that was coming to the tap room that night, and just right around 4:30, 5 o'clock, yeast is in bed, floors are all squeegeed, tap room's not open yet, staff's not quite there yet. You can sit out and just drink a beer and enjoy the sense of accomplishment and the excitement of what's coming up ahead.
What about you, William? What's your favorite so far?
My favorite so far, and the funny part, I didn't even think about this till I'm listening to you guys.
Distributor meeting.
My new distributor, yes, because
you have Jason. Jason's.
Yeah.
I've had a few beers with Jason.
There's beer there. There's beer there. But I used to, it's not necessarily a Khonso moment, but it goes back to sort of our origins. There used to be a festival here in East Atlanta, and I would do the beer buying for it. So that's how I found out about Saint Somewhere, and I created this curated VIP room, which had, it was like a little mini Shelton, and just people going up there and saying that, man, this was just really good stuff. It was stuff you couldn't find anywhere. Just the experience of just seeing people enjoy it. And for Khonso, we still are close to our origins. We used to do backyard parties. So we'd have 4 homebrew ready and just having a good time with people. Some people who were new to homebrew and craft, as well as some people who were more seasoned coming and enjoying it and actually having good things to say about it. My proudest moment was recently at Cask Ale Festival, and our cask, although it didn't win, did pretty good in the scoring. So we had a barley wine that Kevin and I had sat on for 3-4 months, and Kevin, my business partner, and we still love the beer, but we also love the fact that it brings people together.
Awesome.
Didn't see any questions pop up. We had some comments from folks who had checked in. Any last words?
I would always leave any opportunity I can to say that a lot of people have the impression that I would say don't open a brewery. And I want to make it clear that I don't think that at all. Do it, maybe for the reasons that we just said. Have fun with it, but just be very wary of the fact that it can't just be all fun, or everybody that's involved financially is going to be having some bad days, right? So as long as you get your head screwed on straight and you get everything in there and you do it right, make the beer that makes the money, have a blast. I mean, I don't regret the 10 years that I spent in the brewery industry, even though I call it a sentence. I just think it's funny to say that. They are some of the best memories of my life. So yeah, absolutely.
Same here. I mean, and I'm still living it, just on the other side of it. I would not recommend opening a brewery, but if that's your passion, follow your passion, do it, but do it with your eyes open.
Yeah, definitely. First, remember and realize, which I didn't at the first, that you're actually running a business. I know it sounds weird, and specifically a manufacturing business and an entertainment business. So the more you learn about those two industries, the more well prepared you'll be to tackle whatever comes along. Also, do it.
When is your new one opening, Dean?
There's some things going on. I've got like 2 different things that could possibly be happen. So I also might be a spousal hire at UC Davis. So who knows? We'll see.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
breaking news.
Awesome. Glad you guys could participate in this conversation we had today. I continue to learn a lot, even in this conversation, about the journey in beer, getting it started, operating it, and righting the ship when the ship needs to be righted. So thank you all very much. This has been wonderful. Thank you, Andrew, for being the host, and thank you, Jason Sleeman, who I actually know personally. A brewing lender with UCBI outside of in North Carolina, but he does financing for many breweries, especially across the Southeast, but wanted to give him a shout out as well. It's lunchtime here in Atlanta, and I'm going to let everybody go and have a great rest of your day. I look forward to talking with all of you at one point in the future, and hopefully maybe at Khonso.
Yeah,
There it is. I can never figure that out. All right, guys. Have a great one.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Warren.
having
Thank
me
you, Andrew. Thanks
for
everybody.
hosting. I appreciate it.
Yeah.